Welcome to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project, where we're creating the blueprint to help you become the best human you can be so you can give your gifts back to the world. I'm your guide and fellow optimizer, Christopher Camp. It's been estimated that current knowledge workers are spending an average of 15 or more hours per week sitting in meetings. And for many executives, that number can be doubled. So what's with the meeting mania? With the amount of time we're spending in meetings, it's critical that we make these meetings meaningful. And let's face it, many of them are far from that. So how do we fix this? To bring clarity to this issue, the title for our session today is How to Run a Meeting. Make your meetings effective, efficient, and enjoyable. Our expert here to help us with this is Josh Murphy. Josh recently completed a 10-year term as Mayo Clinic's Chief Legal Officer. He started his legal career as a trial lawyer in Chicago before joining the Mayo Legal Department in 2000. At Mayo, he served as the chair of the Litigation Practice Group and Associate Chief Legal Officer before his appointment as Chief Legal Officer in 2015. In that role, Josh was responsible for the strategic and operational leadership of the legal department and provided direct legal support to Mayo Clinic's executive leadership team and board of trustees. Josh's practice is now focusing on data privacy issues in support of Mayo's strategic business relationships. Needless to say, Josh has been in and run a lot of meetings during his career, so I think he's well positioned to help us with this topic today. So, Josh, welcome to the Human Optimization Project. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris. It's my pleasure to be here.
Good. Important topic. I think we all need some help on this one. To get us organized, I have it broken down into three sections or three big questions here. So I'll run through those quickly to kind of outline things for our listeners. So our first section or big question will be, what defines an effective meeting and why does it matter? The second, why do most meetings feel like a time waste and what impact does that have on us? And then the third big one, we'll try to get into some solutions. So what steps can we take to make our next meeting effective, efficient, and enjoyable? So that enjoyable one, I think, is going to be a big challenge for you, but I think it's worth talking about. Does that sound like a fair challenge to you?
It sounds great.
All right, so let's do it. So we'll dive into our first section here. We're going to talk about what defines an effective meeting and why does it matter. So let's just start kind of with some definitions. And how do experts distinguish a meeting from other forms of collaboration, such as email, chat, documents, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's a great question now more than ever because with the changes in technology, there's so many different ways for people to collaborate and interact, and they can do so in real time through different platforms. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, how I would define a meeting is this is real time, face-to-face, even if it's virtual, you're still looking at people's faces and working from a similar set of reference materials, whether it's a PowerPoint that's on the screen or a document someone's sharing. So this is different than a group chat or collaboration on an individual document.
Okay, so this is something that's synchronous. So we're all sitting in the same space, real space or virtual space, and that landscape has certainly changed for us, over the last decade. So I think that's really helpful to sort of set some ground rules because I do think that there are certain rules and etiquette and procedures that apply to chat groups and email threads and all of that, and that's sort of separate from what we're talking about today. We'll have separate optimization project sessions on those topics as well for our listeners. So today we're just going to focus on these real-time, face-to-face meeting where you're working from a similar reference material. So very well outlined. So talk to me about the current state of meetings. How big of a deal are they for us in the U.S.?
I think it's a bigger deal than it ever has been. With the pandemic, everyone shifting to work from home, I think what we saw was an increase in the number of meetings and an increase in the number of meetings involving people we normally wouldn't meet with, a broader cross-section of our organizations. And with this increase in frequency of meetings, it's a double-edged sword. It creates a greater opportunity to do good things with good people that maybe weren't part of your normal work universe. But because there's so many of them, if you do it wrong, it can really hurt your organization and hurt people on an individual level as well. The risk is major lack of productivity, and then, of course, really wearing people down if they feel like they're not spending their time productively, and in fact, the meetings are eating into their productive time, pushing their productive time back to later in the day.
Mm-hmm. And I think, too, even with this increased flexibility, which I agree, it is a mixed blessing. One of the things that I've seen and experienced is, yes, I get to meet with people that I never had a chance to meet with before, which is wonderful. Definitely have more meetings than I've ever had before, which sometimes that's good, sometimes not so good. And also, I think the timing of those meetings has changed now. It used to be if everything's in person, you had to do it during business hours.
Yeah.
And now I think people feel, well, we can do this virtually, so let's just do it Thursday night, Tuesday night, Saturday morning.
Right.
There's no problem encroaching into
Yeah.
times that were traditionally off limits for meetings. Are you seeing that as well?
For sure. And I see that as a risk, frankly. And those people who are calling for meetings on a Sunday afternoon need to understand that their home lives, their weekends aren't like everybody else's. And so that may not be a big ask for them, but it may be a big ask for someone who normally would want to be at their son's or daughter's soccer tournament that afternoon.
Yeah. And I think, we have to be careful. This conversation does have the potential to lean towards the negative because we all sort of have this natural distaste or disdain for meetings, or at least a lot of people do. But I don't want to overshadow what you mentioned about the benefits of them too. So they're critical. We have to have their massive benefits. So can you give us a little bit of a flavor for why we need meetings and what the real benefits of them are?
Yeah. The benefit of a meeting is you bring together more than just one or two people. And it is the bringing together of a diverse set of perspectives, expertise, and skill sets that allows you to identify problems, opportunities, solutions that would elude a smaller group. And again, skewing towards, or at least not ignoring the positive, the fact that we now meet so often virtually makes it so much easier to bring people together so you can make sure you have the right people with the right set of skill sets around the table or virtual table. Mm-hmm. And even coming back to that call for a Sunday afternoon meeting, looking for the positives, if you really need to have a Sunday afternoon meeting, and sometimes you do, the ability to do it from the parking lot at your son or daughter's soccer tournament is a whole lot better than having to come into the office.
Or it gives me access to somebody that I wouldn't have access to if I was restricted to only meeting with them Monday to Friday, 9 to 5.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you're right. It is a double-edged sword. I like how you've outlined that. And in your response there, you talked about, coming together to define problems, opportunities, or solutions. So you're talking a little bit about what the purpose of meetings are and what the goals are. So what should a goal be for a meeting?
Yeah. So I thought about this and tried to come up with a number of different categories of meetings because you do need to have a goal, but the goal isn't always going to be the same. So one way to sort of categorize different types of meetings would be there could be a meeting focused on strategy. Where are we now and where do we want to be? There can be a meeting focused on planning. Okay, we know where we want to get to. How do we get there? Who are the people we need to bring together to help us get there? There is the execution or project management related meetings, which are getting into the more operational specifics of what are the work streams, what are the milestones, what is the progress we want to achieve. These are all meetings geared towards advancing the ball. But then there's a fourth category of meeting that I would throw in there as well, and that's more about context and culture. So it's important to hold meetings where the leader of the meeting, the leader of the department, is giving their team a leadership update so they understand what the broader organization is doing and how their work fits into that. There are also opportunities at these sort of context and culture meetings to give people within your department visibility, for them to talk about what they're doing, so people can be attending a meeting where they're not so much focused on what they're doing, but what's happening around them. And then lastly, just bringing people together for that sense of connection and cohesion as part of a team is really important. Most of these meetings really are focused on getting things done, advancing the ball. But then you also need that fourth category as well to keep people together and aligned and working together.
And I think that fourth category of context and culture is probably the one that's most commonly overlooked out of these categories, but might be the one that we need the most. And that, given our world becoming more electronic and virtual based and online, getting people together for the sake of having meaningful social connections, I think, is critical in our world now.
Agree, 100%.
Okay. So can you tell me, in an ideal world, what does an effective meeting look like? Are there certain key elements that you see are just essential that have to be there in order for it to be maximally effective?
Sure. And I would say that what I say next probably pertains more to the first three categories of meetings. The fourth, the context and connection, can be, I think, a little bit more loosely structured. And my answer is meetings should look a lot like surgeries, which you know something about.
Now you're talking, yeah.
And I'll say I thought of this as an analogy. I give myself credit for thinking of it, but then I Googled it and saw that somebody else, has written about this as well.
Okay.
But here's what I mean. A surgery happens only if needed. We're not doing surgery that's not necessary. All the necessary people are there. Only the necessary people are there. Whatever pre-reading is required before the surgery/meeting is done. The supporting materials that need to be available, whether it's equipment, scans, that sort of thing, they are all at hand. Everyone is aligned on the same purpose and goal. You think about the surgical pause at the beginning of a surgery. All right, everybody, this is what we're going to do over the next hour and a half or 3.5 hours, whatever. Everyone is focused on the same thing the whole time. We don't have people two-screening, looking at emails or looking at Instagram in the operating room. You have a team leader, the surgeon, but everyone understands that it's necessary for them to speak up if something needs to be brought to the leader's attention. The surgery/meeting doesn't take any longer than absolutely necessary. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and finally there is postoperative follow-up on how the patient is doing. All of those concepts, I think, can be pretty closely applied to how someone plans for and runs a meeting.
That's a phenomenal analogy. I'm going to give you credit for it. I don't know who wrote about it. I'm going to give you credit. This is excellent, and I would agree. I mean, we look at these things, and if you would run through that list, I would think, goodness, I don't know how many meetings I've been a part of that would meet all of those criteria. It seems uncommon or rare, but I would tell you, essentially every surgery I've ever been in, which numbers in the thousands, does meet those criteria. So it shows we can do it.
Yeah, and this is, I think, another example of where very often those of us in administrative ranks can learn a lot from what's being done in the practice at Mayo Clinic, because the practice is so finely honed and streamlined for efficiency. we need to sort of pay attention what you all are doing in the hospital and the clinics and apply that to what we do in the administrative ranks.
Well said. And speaking of sort of administrative ranks, do you think that everything we've talked about so far, is this something that really just applies in the corporate space, or is this knowledge that really everybody needs to know?
So there are different people who live their lives differently, sort of outside of the workplace. And I know there are people that take a pretty sort of disciplined approach towards, setting goals for their family for the week or for the month or for the year. I'm not one of those types, but where I do see the things we're talking about as having an impact on life outside of your job is if you're part of an organization that does a good job with meetings, you can do your job more efficiently. It cuts into your personal family time less. And then your own state of mind is more healthy and positive because you're not feeling kind of frustrated with how all of these meetings are being run in the office. So I think good things happening in your job translate to a positive impact on your personal life.
Well stated. And I think the other way around too, if you can do it in your personal life, then that translates to your job. And one of the key components that underpins everything you've said so far is the concept of intentionality to me. And so everything you've talked about is going about your approach to meetings being very thoughtful, deliberate, and intentional. And I would say too, in your personal life, it may not look like the same list that you gave us here, but I think if you apply that intentionality, and that's going to be different if you're, coaching your kids, 5-year-old soccer team and you're passing out jerseys at the first practice.
Yeah.
You don't need to be quite as intense as this.
Yeah.
But you need to have some organization intentionality about it. So you kind of decide what that is based on the circumstances that you're in.
Yeah. You could say vacation. You're probably going to have a better vacation if you take a little bit of time to plan.
Right.
For, what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. Even if you're not getting down to the minute with your itinerary, a little bit of homework and planning always pays off.
Yeah, excellent. So let's transition to our second section here, where we're going to talk about why, and this is going to take a lean towards a negative, I think, we'll try to flip it back to the positive at the end. So listeners, hang in there with us. It's going to sound bad for a bit, but we will recover this thing at the end, I promise. So why is it that most meetings feel like a waste of time? That's really kind of what we're going to be talking about here. So what are the most common problems that you see with meetings today?
Yeah. So too many, too long, not adequately planned, whether the meeting really is necessary, what are the topics to be discussed, who are the people attending the meeting, overall, just what are we trying to accomplish? And then also sort of lack of follow-up. And, I'd say there are two separate problems. One is the meeting even required? And some thought really needs to go into that. Is this something that can be managed by email? Not everything can, but a lot can. And so I think people really need to ask that question. But probably even more than that, I would suggest is simply there's not adequate planning for the meeting. And a concept I like to share is don't just schedule a meeting, plan for the meeting. There are people who like to say, all right, let's get together, let's meet and go over that. And they have this false hope that all you have to do is get together, and at the meeting, the problem will miraculously, and that's unlikely to happen. And so, taking the time to plan for what are you going to talk about, what is going to be shared ahead of time, who's going to be participating, and what are you going to get out of it. That's what people need to spend more time on.
And I'm going to add one other thing to your list, if I can.
Yeah.
That list is great, but one of the issues that I see commonly is that they're not fun.
Yeah.
There's very and I don't mean that they ought to be a party. We don't need balloons and confetti and apple pie at every meeting, but oftentimes there's not a lot of joy in these meetings.
Yeah.
And I think, and I don't necessarily mean rah-rah celebratory joy. Sometimes I think that can come across as a sense of progress or a sense of purpose, so it's lacking that positivity or those positive vibes.
Right. Or even a little bit of humor.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where, setting the right tone is important, because you can be disciplined in how you've organized something and determined for the meeting to not be a waste of time, but you can still kid around a little bit during the meeting and set a tone that allows other people to be not so serious. I often sort of judge a meeting by what's going on in the chat. And the chat, I like to see the chat kind of active, not to the point where people are paying more attention to the chat than who's speaking. But if you see in the chat, people are adding substantive information or comments, or even making a joke or two, or adding a GIF or a GIF, whatever it's called. Mm-hmm. It just puts people in a more positive frame of mind, and they leave the meeting feeling better about what they just did.
Yeah, and it does show some engagement as well. It's much easier to be engaged when there is a sense of positivity that makes you want to participate and be involved. Not to say that every meeting is and oftentimes there are meetings held specifically for the purpose of delivering really terrible news.
Yeah.
So they don't all have to have the jokes and humor, but I think that we should try to figure out how we can incorporate some level of positivity when possible.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Now let's talk about, a lot of what we talked about is the leader or the planner of the meeting. Let's talk a little bit about the attendees. So a lot of our audience may say, well, I'm not planning the meeting, so this isn't on me. That's on my boss. What about as a participant? What are some common mistakes that you see attendees make that result in a decreased quality of a meeting?
So I think everybody has different views about this. I really like to see people on camera in these virtual meetings. I think that if you're attending, unless you have a really good reason to be off camera, you should be on camera so people can see you and see that you are paying attention, you're engaged, you are actively part of the meeting. So that would be one thing. I think that people need to be prepared. If there is reading to be done in advance, they should be reading it so they're not asking questions answered by the reading materials that's wasting time. They need to be paying attention the whole time, not two screening, not looking at their emails or looking at Instagram. I think it's a pet peeve of everybody when someone asks a question that was answered 5 minutes ago and they didn't hear it because they weren't adequately focusing. Conversely, if those are kind of the things you don't want to do, people who are actively engaged, even if it's reacting to a comment, giving a thumbs up, giving the, clapping hands, adding a comment in the chat, demonstrating that they are engaged, they appreciate what others are adding. Even if you're not saying something yourself, you can still be a supportive and engaged participant. And then, of course, positively contributing to the conversation. All of those things are helpful. We've all been there leading a meeting, and there are people that you see who are nodding along, and even just in their facial expression or body language, you can tell they're tracking, they're on board, they want to help. That positivity being added to the meeting is really, really helpful.
So what are the negative impacts of a meeting that's run poorly? And I'm thinking of the impacts both from the leader's perspective and the attendee's perspective. What are the consequences of poorly run meetings?
Yeah. There is the negative consequence that you've just had 4 or 8 or 12 people spend an hour without really accomplishing anything. I mean, it is a black hole of non-productivity. And you think about what could have been done, what those 4 or 8 or 12 people could have actually got done during that same hour if they weren't in that meeting. So loss of productivity. There is, I think, a loss of confidence or faith in leadership too. You become a little cynical that the organization doesn't know what it's doing if you're constantly attending meetings that are not productive. And then lastly, there is this individual harm on people who, because their day is mostly meetings, if those meetings aren't productive, that means that they are doing their work later in the day. It's eating into their evening time, their family time. That can really negatively impact how someone feels about their job, their work unit, what have you.
Oh, very, very well said and very well laid out. And I think we've all been a part of those meetings that you go into and you just don't have faith and you think, oh, here goes another one of these meetings. I know what these are like.
It tells you something when, and this has probably happened to most people listening, when you have one of those days, sometimes it's a Friday, you look at your calendar and there's not a lot of meetings, and it makes you happy. And it makes you happy not because you plan on slacking off, but because you feel like I'm actually going to get work done.
Yeah.
And so what does that tell you? Again, the positive is we've got people who want to get things done, who want to apply their talents and skills productively, but we want to change the current state so that they feel better about a day where there are lots of meetings.
Very well said. So speaking of a lot of meetings and looking at your calendar, what are some of the potential pitfalls and benefits of pre-scheduled recurring meetings in your experience? We all have some of these on our calendar. Good thing, bad thing, or mixed blessing?
So I like them, but I like them if the people participating and if there is an owner or leader of those meetings is thinking ahead of time, and not an hour ahead of time, but the day before, 2 days before, do we actually need to hold this regularly scheduled meeting? Can we cancel it? Can we put things off to the next meeting so that you're not having a meeting just because it's on calendars? The result is you're not spending time in a meeting when the time isn't well spent, and now you've freed up a half hour or hour, what have you, on someone's calendar. That gives them a little bit of a boost, and now they're going to use that time productively. On the idea of these sort of regularly scheduled periodic meetings, I also want to put a plug in for people to schedule meetings with themselves, or what I call a meeting with my to-do list, blocking out time for yourself to get stuff done. Those are super valuable. As long as you can't overdo it, and you need to be willing to give that time up if there's a priority meeting with other people. But a meeting with yourself, a meeting with your to-do list can really help.
And I think too, for some of these recurring meetings, you can almost do, if all right, every Friday morning I have this standing meeting, but I'm gonna allocate. Every Wednesday I'm gonna take 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it takes to prep for that Friday meeting. You can almost pre-schedule your time to check off all of these things that you outlined for us in that first section.
Completely agree.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move into our third section here, where we're going to start talking about some changes we can make. So now, that skewed a little bit towards the negative, not as bad as I expected. So you did a good job of keeping that positive, Josh. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So now let's go to the third section, where we're going to talk about how we can make our meetings effective, efficient, and enjoyable. So we'll kind of go through each of those three things. So let's start with effective. What are the things that we can do to maximize the efficacy or effectiveness of our meetings?
Yeah. So I had mentioned, 4 different categories of meetings before. I'm sure there's more, but the thought is before a meeting, and frankly, before scheduling a meeting, you have to have a clear sense of what you want to accomplish. And then, as I mentioned, don't just schedule the meeting, but plan for it. If you've got a goal in mind, what is it you need to do beforehand? It's the work before the meeting to make sure that when the meeting actually occurs, you're going to accomplish that goal or get pretty darn close. So that has to do with, again, who's attending, what's being sent out in advance, what's going to be shared during the meeting, what's the agenda look like. And then when the meeting is held, stick to the plan. Avoid, getting distracted and going off on tangents. You want to develop an agenda. You want to stick to the agenda. The meeting should have beginning. All right, everybody, our surgical pause. This is what we want to accomplish today. Get into it. And then at the very end, the last thing you want is you've run out of time. People have to get to their other meeting and they're just dropping off, maybe saying something in the chat, got to drop off, got another meeting, and you're kind of losing people indiscriminately. You need to have 5 minutes or so reserved for the end so there is a wrap-up and a clear alignment around next steps. All right, what are we doing next?
Now, how about efficiency? How do we make them more efficient? And I think that this is a big one for a lot of us because these meetings can go on and on and on. And often I think that it's for good reasons. Sometimes it is people wanting to be engaged, wanting to contribute. But as you mentioned, it's pretty easy to get sidetracked and let things go off the rails and not actually accomplish your goal. So how can you make it efficient?
Yeah. Again, having an agenda with time periods attached to each topic. Everybody has been in meetings where it's hard to stick to the agenda. But I would suggest that, number one, you add something to the agenda only if it's important. You give as best as you can predict how much time that topic requires. And if you get towards the end, rather than just run over into the next topic and get everything else behind, identify on that topic that you weren't able to wrap up, who's involved in that, but because it might not be everybody in that meeting. And the takeaway from the meeting is they're going to continue that discussion. They're going to tie up that loose end. Move into the next topic. Same thing with your goal, always of finishing within the time frame. But if you maintain that discipline around time management, that group that you're meeting with is going to get better about being a little bit more crisp,
right?
With their presentation, with their questions, staying on track so that your meeting, again, has the beginning, middle, and end, and the patient isn't left on the operating table without being closed up.
And I think if you do that consistently, you're exactly right. The people that are attending are going to know. They're going to say, oh, this is a Josh Murphy meeting. Let's go. We better be buttoned up. We're going to be on time. I know I'm going to make it out of here in time to make it to my next meeting, so I'm not stressed. I can fully engage. I'm not checking my watch the whole time or looking elsewhere or getting distracted or trying to do double duty.
Right.
So I think that you can set that tone, and that hopefully will get easier over time. Okay, so now the last one, which maybe is the most challenging, maybe not, but how do we make them more enjoyable?
Yeah, this is getting back to the different categories of meetings. One about strategy, planning, and then execution. Those are, that's a little bit more, this is about business, this is about getting stuff done. As we discussed, you can still do it without being too self-serious. You can do it in a way that it's still sort of positive. People feel a sense of collegiality. feeding off of each other in the course of a meeting where you've got the right people there. People feel free to speak up, to disagree. There's kind of an energy in a well-run, inclusive meeting that has a purpose that makes it pretty enjoyable.
Right.
You're part of a well-run machine, and there's a pride that comes in that.
So solving a problem is very satisfying and enjoyable. Yeah,
Right.
100%.
But then I think this gets back to the culture and context. This is a real opportunity within your team to bring people together and have people feel good about where they work and what group they're a part of. And I'm a big believer in leaders sharing information with their teams about what they're seeing from their leadership perspective. In the legal department meetings that I used to chair, for example, we started our department meetings with a leadership update, and I would talk about what was discussed at the last Board of Governors meeting. What's the most important thing on our leaders' minds? Now, of course, there's some things you have to keep confidential, but mostly you can really share with people what Mayo Clinic, this amazing organization, is trying to accomplish, and where what they're doing fits in, and how what they're doing is a really important piece, maybe a small piece, but an important and necessary piece of the broader things that Mayo Clinic is doing. So they like to know what you're seeing. It's interesting. Mayo is doing interesting things. And then there's a real opportunity to put a spotlight on people that normally wouldn't be talking to the whole department, or they're not working with everybody in the department. So we would regularly ask one of our attorneys or non-attorneys to give a 10-minute presentation on something that they were working on, something that we think is interesting, think people would be interested to hear about, even if it's completely irrelevant to what they do. It is bringing home to them that people in the department are doing really important and cool work. And then finally, just bringing people together in a meeting where you welcome questions, and it might be by Slido or some other means, bringing together people just to reinforce those connections that they have within the workspace. Ask for feedback in our department for our meetings, especially after the pandemic when we started to have more meetings.
Right.
And we asked people about these department meetings, which they were 90 minutes. We spent 90 minutes together once a month. And we asked people, are the meetings too long? Would you like us to shorten it up? And people responded, no. We like those meetings. We like that time together. We like what we're learning about Mayo Clinic and about the work that our colleagues are doing. So there is a time and place for those meetings that aren't just about advancing the ball up the field.
Well, and the point of getting feedback, I think, is a critical one, too. One, not only does it help you inform and change the meeting structure and setup, it also allows you to meet the needs of the other people that are attending. And then lastly, it gives those attendees some ownership in the meeting.
Yeah.
So now, if you voted for a 90-minute meeting, you can't complain about it. We're doing this for you, right? You're part of the process. So we all have some ownership in it, which we should. So then I think that not only will create some ownership, but then that'll foster some engagement and say, hey, we asked for this. We want this. It's important to us.
Yeah.
Now we're going to prove it to you in how we go about it.
And on the feedback issue, feedback can be sought through a survey to lots of people, or if you're the person who's responsible for running one of these meetings, after the first meeting or after the third meeting, you could just ask a couple of trusted coworkers, hey, what do you think? How's it going? What advice do you have for us to do these meetings better? Because when you're running the show, you lack objectivity for how you're doing and running the meeting. So ask someone else that you trust to tell you
That'll give you a straight
what's
answer.
working and what's not.
Yeah, very well said. So as we wrap up this session, I think it might be interesting to do a little exercise here. So I'm going to give you a couple scenarios, and I want to hear how you would approach setting up a meeting for these scenarios. So I'll give you a big high stakes one and then a low stakes one. So let's say that you're in charge of setting up a meeting with your company, and you've got to make a major decision that's going to likely change the course or trajectory of the company. So pretty substantial meeting. How do you go about setting that up and organizing that and getting the right people in the room to make the decision in the way that they need to?
Sure. Well, I think that, I've been at Mayo now for 25 years, and this is the world I know. Mayo is really good at working up these proposals, bringing together the right people with the right expertise. And if it's a decision of significant consequence, it goes up the chain of committees, so to speak. And the committees providing feedback to the proponents that want to propose a really big decision. Each time they go from one committee to the next higher one, they're getting feedback, helping strengthen the proposal. So by the time this idea gets to a higher level committee, it's really strong. They've done their homework. But the risk of that is it becomes almost a foregone conclusion. If it's made it this far, it must be a good idea. And the last thing you want is for that proposal to be rubber stamped. And so I think it's really valuable for any proposal or decision of consequence to have the proposal done right. But when the final decision is made, there needs to be one or two people who are given the assignment before the day of the meeting to push back, to be devil's advocates, to pressure test as much as possible whether this decision seems like the right one. Have they received all the right information? Have they thought about all the right angles? Because if it gets past that, everybody's still in favor. You can have a high confidence level that the right decision is going to be made. But that you just don't want to let the sheer momentum of the proposal be the decider.
Push it through. Yeah. All right. So let me give you something on the flip side of that. Incredibly easy. So small decision that has to be made. It's not a major consequence, but you can't make it on your own. You're not allowed to.
Yeah.
You got to have the vote of the team, say 8 to 10 people, something like that. So this is a small thing, and it'll be minimally consequential to everybody involved. How do you handle that?
These decisions do come up, and I think now, not about meetings of the Board of Governors at Mayo Clinic, but more within the legal department and my, 9-person management team. There are decisions that come up to that group, not necessarily because they're hugely consequential, but because somebody needs to decide. We need to go in one direction or another. And there's a real risk that you overanalyze those sorts of things and spend way more time talking about it when the reality is either way, maybe there's 3 choices or 2 choices. They're all pretty good. But a decision has to be made. And in a situation like that, I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do to have the presentation or proposal made, the options on the table, and then you just do a flash vote. Majority vote wins. And then you move on. And, look back afterwards to see how that decision panned out. But I do think at places that are conservative by nature, there can be the risk of overanalysis that just slows you down.
Sure. Well, this has been a phenomenal session, and I'd like to transition us in here to the summary. I've learned a lot in talking about this, and you've got me rethinking a lot of the meetings that are currently on my calendar, things I need to be doing to help structure those and make them a little bit better.
Sure.
So I'd like to take a minute just to kind of summarize my notes here and my main learning points
Okay.
from today. We talked about meetings. They tend to have a very negative connotation in our minds, but they're really double-edged, and that there are a lot of substantial benefits that come. I mean, honestly, they move the world forward in a lot of ways, and it gives you a chance to get diverse set of people around to determine what the problem is, what the opportunities are, and what the solutions. And those are things that you can't do on your own. So I think that is an essential benefit that we often overlook. I like how you broke it down into the 4 different types of meetings. So strategy, planning, execution, and then the 4th being context and culture, which is sort of a unique set, but important. I obviously loved your analogy of meetings with surgery, which I think is great. And our challenge is going to come from that today. So I'll recap those elements in the challenge. We talked about issues with meetings, having too many, they're going too long, they're not planned, they're not needed, you don't have clear goals, you don't have any follow-up, and there's no positivity or enjoyment in them as well. And then we talked about some solutions for how you can do that. And then some common mistakes for attendees, which I think we often overlook, either not having your camera on or being engaged. Make sure that you come prepared, be sure to pay attention, engage actively in a way that adds to the meeting and not distracts or take away from the meeting, and then be sure to contribute. And then I thought you also did a phenomenal job of breaking down different strategies we can use to make it more effective, and then a list of things we can do to make it more efficient and more enjoyable. So that was excellent for me. And so you've answered our 3 big questions over the last 40 minutes or so here. I'd like to give you some time to answer them distinctly. So I'll recap those for you. So our first big question: what defines an effective meeting and why does it matter? What's your rapid fire answer?
Did it hold your attention? Are you glad that you attended? Did you learn something? Was something achieved? Those are things you ask yourself. If you're glad you attended, if you learned something, if you achieved something, that's a good meeting. Why is it important? Because we spend so much time in them, and they are, again, this double-edged sword. Incredible opportunity to do good things, exciting things, have great conversations and interactions and exchange of ideas with our colleagues. But if you don't do it right, it's a downer.
Mm-hmm. And why do most meetings feel like a waste of time, and what impact does that have on us?
Inadequate planning. People scheduling meetings but not planning for them.
Perfect. And then our third, what steps can we take to make our next meeting more effective, efficient, and enjoyable?
Know what you want to accomplish, plan for it, and stick to the plan. And lastly, seek feedback to see how you're doing, to make sure you're doing a good job.
I think that feedback piece is missed very, very often, which I think is fantastic. So we're going to end this with a challenge. We always like to give a challenge or a call to action for people. So I really loved your analogy of, meetings should be like surgery. So our challenge here is to have people look at their next meeting, whether you're an attendee or you're the leader, doesn't matter. This still applies to you. And see if these elements are there. And if not, try to add one in, at least one. And then once you figure that out, keep adding more. So the analogy that I wrote down, how a meeting is like surgery. You only have it if needed. All of the necessary people are there. Only the necessary people are there. The pre-reading or prep is done. All the material you need is available. Everybody has the same purpose and goal. You're focused on the same thing throughout the entire meeting. There's a clear leader, but everyone can and should speak up. It goes no longer than needed, has a clear beginning, middle, and end, and then there's follow-up and feedback afterwards. So that's a phenomenal list. I've got that written down, and I'm going to rewrite it several times. So to our audience, you should write that down as well, and then use that as a checklist next time you're planning or attending a meeting to see how many of those elements are included, and if not, add as many of them as you can. So, Josh, thank you so much for joining us. This has been an excellent session. I've learned a lot. I got a page full of notes here, so it's definitely going to change some things in my life. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate what you're doing on this series.
Great. Thank you so much. So the title of this session was How to Run a Meeting. Make your meetings effective, efficient, and enjoyable. I think Josh has given you some good instruction on how you can do that. So to our audience, remember to live intentionally, consistently better. Keep striving to be the best human you can be and never stop optimizing. Thanks for listening to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project. If you like this episode, hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find us. Know someone who might benefit? Share the episode with them to join us in our mission to help as many people as possible become the best humans they can be. Have feedback or a topic idea? Email us at optimize@mayo.edu. And be sure to look for us on Instagram, X, and YouTube.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be relied upon for medical, professional, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional for any questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.